I used to roll my eyes when night shift workers talked about the feeling. You know the one, that creeping sense that the world operates under different rules after midnight. That darkness doesn't just hide things, it changes them. I thought it was nonsense, superstition, the kind of stories bored security guards told to make their jobs sound more interesting. Then I spent 6 months watching over Mendelssohn Cemetery. Now, I don't work nights anymore, and I sure as hell never went back. I was 23, newly married, and drowning in student debt. My wife Sarah and I were living in my parents' old rental house, a weathered 2-story on the edge of town that sat uncomfortably close to Mendelssohn Cemetery. Close enough that on quiet evenings you could see the crooked headstones through our bedroom window. The cemetery wasn't one of those pristine, well-funded places with manicured lawns and respectful silence. Mendelssohn was forgotten. Headstones leaned at drunken angles, paths crumbled into dirt and weeds. Ancient oak trees had grown so thick overhead that even during the day, parts of it stayed in permanent twilight. When I saw the security posting, the pay caught my eye immediately, almost double what I'd been making at the gas station. 6 hours a night, 5 nights a week, 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. My only job was to sit in a small booth near the main entrance and maintain a visible presence. That's exactly how the ad phrased it. Maintain a visible presence. The interview lasted maybe 10 minutes. The manager, a gray-haired man named Mr. Carver, who looked like he hadn't slept well in years, asked if I was comfortable being alone, if I had a reliable car, if I startled easily. That last question should have been a red flag. But I needed the money, and the hours worked perfectly with my college schedule. I could study between rounds, sleep during the day, and still make it to my afternoon classes. I started the following Monday. The first week was exactly what I expected. Boring. I'd arrive at 9 p.m., unlock the small wooden booth that sat just inside the cemetery gates, and settle in for 6 hours of absolutely nothing. The booth was barely bigger than a phone booth, just enough room for a folding chair, a small desk, a space heater, and a flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like a trapped wasp. I brought my textbooks, energy drinks, my phone charger. Most nights I saw maybe 2 or 3 cars pass on the main road, never anyone entering the cemetery itself. By 11 p.m., the world felt completely abandoned. I liked it at first, the quiet, the solitude. Then came my second week. It was a Thursday night. I remember because I'd just finished a particularly brutal chemistry exam that afternoon. I was tired, caffeinated, and halfway through an article on my phone when I heard it. Footsteps right outside the booth. I looked up immediately, expecting to see someone standing at the window. Maybe a late visitor who needed directions, or someone from the maintenance crew. But when I turned on the exterior light and stepped outside, there was nothing. The path stretched empty in both directions. No cars in the parking area. No movement among the headstones. Just me, standing in a small pool of yellow light, surrounded by darkness and the smell of damp earth. I told myself it was an animal, a raccoon maybe, or a stray dog. But the footsteps had been too deliberate, too evenly paced, too human. I went back inside, locked the door, and turned up the radio. After that night, it kept happening. Not every shift, but often enough that I started anticipating it. Around 1:30 or 1:40 a.m., always in that window, I'd hear something outside. Sometimes it was footsteps, Sometimes it was a dry, rasping cough that sounded like it came from an old man's chest. Once, I distinctly heard someone clear their throat, like they were standing right behind me. When I spun around, I was still alone. Each time I'd force myself to check. I'd open the door, shine my flashlight across the grounds, walk a few yards down the path, and each time there was nothing. No signs of disturbance, no footprints, no people. I started keeping a log, thinking maybe I could identify a pattern or report it to Mr. Carver. But what would I even say? I keep hearing invisible people? By my 4th week, I'd stopped investigating. I'd just sit there, door locked, hands wrapped around a lukewarm energy drink, and wait for whatever it was to pass. The worst part wasn't the sounds themselves. It was the waiting. Because I knew, somewhere deep in my gut, that something was testing me, learning my routine, seeing how I'd react. The night everything changed started normally enough. It was a Tuesday in late October, cold enough that I'd brought an extra jacket and a thermos of coffee. The cemetery looked different that time of year. Fog would roll in around midnight, thick enough to blur the headstones into abstract shapes. The trees seemed darker somehow, hungrier. I was reading a chapter on cellular biology when I heard them again. Footsteps. But this time, they didn't fade. They came closer. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Slow, measured steps on the gravel path, moving directly toward my booth. I set down my textbook and stared at the door. The footsteps stopped. Right outside. I could feel someone standing there. The same way you can sense when someone's watching you from across a room. The air pressure changed. The temperature dropped just slightly. I waited for a knock, a voice, something. Instead, I watched, my heart hammering in my throat as the door handle began to turn. Not quickly, not violently, slowly, carefully. Like whoever was out there knew exactly what they were doing and didn't want to startle me. The lock held. Thank God the lock held. I sat frozen, not even breathing, as the handle rotated all the way to the right, testing the mechanism. When it didn't open, the handle held there for what felt like an eternity. Maybe 5 seconds, maybe 30. I honestly couldn't tell. Then, slowly, it rotated back to its original position. And the footsteps resumed. Not back toward the entrance. Deeper. Into the cemetery. I didn't move for another 20 minutes. When I finally worked up the courage to peek out the window, there was nothing but fog and darkness. I called Sarah at 2:30 a.m., my hands still shaking. "Come home," she said immediately. "Just leave." "I can't," I told her. "I need this job." "Then I'm coming there." "No." I said it too quickly, too forcefully. "No, don't. I'm fine. It's probably just, I don't know, kids maybe, someone messing with me." But I didn't believe that. And neither did she. I almost quit the next day. I had the resignation email drafted and everything. But then I thought about our rent, the medical bills from Sarah's surgery earlier that year, the student loans that never seemed to shrink no matter how much I paid. So I went back. For 3 more weeks, nothing happened. No footsteps, no sounds. Just quiet, boring shifts where I actually managed to get through most of my assigned reading. I started to relax, started to convince myself that whatever had been happening was over. Then came the night I'll never forget. It was late November. The first real cold snap had hit, and frost covered everything in a thin, crystalline shell. I arrived at 9 p.m. as usual, settled into the booth, and turned on the small space heater. Around midnight, I noticed my breath was fogging. Even with the heater running, I rubbed my hands together and tried to ignore it, but the temperature kept dropping. By 12:30, I could see my breath with every exhale, thick white clouds in the yellow light. That's when I noticed the window. The glass had fogged over completely, but not from the inside, from the outside. And in that fog, traced with what looked like a fingertip, was a single word: open. I stared at it for a long moment, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. The writing was fresh, the lines still wet and clear against the condensation. Someone had been standing right there, inches from where I sat, and written that message while I was looking down at my phone. My hands fumbled for my cell. No signal. I grabbed the radio Mr. Carver had given me for emergencies. Dead static. And then I heard them. Footsteps, circling the booth. I don't know how long they walked around me. It could have been 20 minutes, it could have been 2 hours. All I know is that I sat in that chair, completely still, listening to the footsteps move in a slow, patient circle around the booth. Sometimes close enough that I could hear fabric brushing against the wooden walls. Sometimes farther away, crunching through frost-covered grass. There was more than one of them, I was sure of that. 2 sets of footsteps, maybe 3, moving at different paces but never stopping, never leaving. The word on the window began to drip, the condensation running down the glass in slow rivulets, but I could still read it. Open. I thought about Sarah, about calling in sick tomorrow and never coming back, about every rational explanation I could conjure: teenagers, vagrants, someone playing an elaborate prank. But none of those explanations fit, because underneath the footsteps, I could hear something else. Whispering. Low, urgent voices, just below the threshold of comprehension, like someone reciting something in a language I'd never heard. The rhythm was wrong, the cadence too structured to be random. I pulled my jacket tighter and kept my eyes on the door. Around 2 a.m., my phone suddenly buzzed. 1 bar of signal had appeared. I immediately called Sarah, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried texting. Something's wrong. Don't come here. I'll explain later. The message failed to send. The signal disappeared again. The footsteps continued. At some point, I think around 2:45, they stopped. Not gradually, not slowly. All at once, mid-stride, like someone had hit a pause button. The whispering stopped too. The temperature in the booth was so cold now that frost had begun forming on the inside of the windows. My fingers were numb. My face ached. I sat there in absolute silence, waiting. Then quietly, I heard one final sound. A hand. It had to be a hand, pressing flat against the door. Not knocking, not scratching, just pressing. Like someone saying, "Goodbye." I didn't move until I saw the first gray light of dawn breaking over the trees. When I finally worked up the courage to stand, My legs had gone completely numb. I hobbled to the door, unlocked it with shaking hands, and stepped outside. The morning air felt shockingly warm compared to the inside of the booth. I looked around, searching for any sign of what had happened. The word on the window was gone, completely evaporated. There were no footprints in the frost, no handprints on the door. The gravel around the booth looked completely undisturbed. It was like nothing had happened at all. But I knew better. I got in my car and drove straight to Mr. Carver's office. He was already there, sitting behind his desk with a cup of coffee and a newspaper, like he'd been expecting me. "I quit," I said. He nodded slowly, not looking surprised. "Understood." "That's it? You're not going to ask why?" He folded his newspaper carefully. "I know why." "Then why didn't you warn me?" "Would you have believed me?" He looked up then, and his eyes were tired, so tired. Would it have made a difference? I didn't have an answer for that. He pulled an envelope from his desk drawer, my final paycheck already prepared. "You lasted longer than most." Most? But he didn't elaborate. I took the envelope and left. That was 8 years ago. I finished college. Sarah and I moved across town. I found a good job with normal hours and fluorescent lighting and living, breathing coworkers. I never told anyone the full story, not even Sarah. What would I say? That I'd been terrorized by invisible footsteps and messages written in frost? But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I'll look up Mendelssohn Cemetery online. The security booth is still there. I've seen it on Google Maps. And according to their website, they're always hiring night security. Always. I don't know what walks grew Mendelssohn after dark. I don't know what it wanted or why it chose to torment me instead of the guards before or after. But I learned something during those 6 months. Some places exist in both our world and somewhere else. And at night, when the barrier is thin, things can reach across. They can knock on your door. They can write messages. They can ask you to let them in. And the only thing protecting you is a flimsy lock and your own stubborn refusal to open the door. I kept that door closed. I hope whoever's sitting in that booth right now is doing the same, because some invitations should never be accepted, and some doors should never, ever be opened. I worked overnight at a small roadside motel for almost a year. People warned me about the job, but not because it was dangerous. They warned me because of the phone. According to them, it always rang when it wasn't supposed to, and whoever answered it never stayed long. I was 24 and desperate for work when I took the night desk job at Pine Hollow Motor Lodge. It was one of those places you only stayed at if your car broke down or you didn't have anywhere else to go. 1 floor, 12 rooms, flickering neon sign. The front desk sat directly across from a long hallway that disappeared into darkness after midnight. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The owner, a woman named Denise, showed me the basics and then paused at the phone. "If it rings after 2, she said, "don't answer it." I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. The first few weeks were uneventful. Occasional late check-ins, a drunk couple arguing, a trucker asking for coffee. The phone never rang after 2. Until one night, around 2:17 a.m. It did. The sound echoed through the empty lobby, sharp, sudden, impossible to ignore. I stared at it. I remembered Denise's warning, but logic kicked in. Maybe it was a guest calling from a room. Maybe she just meant prank calls. I picked it up. There was breathing on the other end. Slow. Wet. Close. "Front desk," I said. "How can I help you?" The breathing stopped. Then, the line went dead. After that, it happened every night. Always between 2:10 and 2:20 a.m. Always just breathing. Never a voice. If I didn't answer, the phone would ring until it stopped on its own. Exactly 13 rings. I started keeping count. On the 7th night, something changed. This time, after I picked up, a voice whispered, "Which room am I in?" The voice sounded wrong, like it was struggling to remember how speech worked. "I don't see your number on the caller ID. Can you tell me your room?" Silence. Then, "I can't see the door." I checked the hallway. All the room doors were closed. All the lights were off. When I returned to the desk, the phone rang again immediately. Same voice. "I hear you moving." My stomach dropped. I hung up. The phone rang again. "I'm cold," the voice said. "Did you lock me in?" I unplugged the phone. At 2:19 a.m., the lobby lights flickered, and from the dark hallway, I heard footsteps, slow, dragging, moving toward the desk. I hid in the back office until morning. At sunrise, Denise arrived like nothing was wrong. When I told her what happened, she sighed and opened a drawer beneath the desk. Inside were old incident reports. One name appeared over and over. A man who died of hypothermia in room 6 years ago after locking himself out during a winter storm. The final report ended with one line: "Phone disconnected. Calls continue." I quit that morning. Before I left, I looked down the hallway one last time. Room 6's door was open. The phone rang behind me. I didn't turn around.